Thank you, Angelina. She obviously avoided saying that she used to be a professor at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, on which board I served. In fact, I was twice invited to chair the board, in which case I would have been her boss. But obviously, for good reasons, she avoided that. Anyway, Mr. President, you asked me how I'm going to cover the topic. Well, to cover is easy. To cover it well is difficult. So I'm going to do it the easy way. Let me begin this way. 200 years ago, there's a British envoy that went to China. And the emperor of the Qing dynasty then, oh, by the way, yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the end of the Qing dynasty. So modern China was founded, you may say, 100 years ago plus 1 day. Anyway, the Qing dynasty began to wane about, 200 years ago? And when the British envoy went to China, the Chinese emperor said to him, "There's nothing we can learn from you. We don't need you." And that was the beginning of the fall of the Chinese. My question is, today, could it be that deep in your conscience for my Western friends, that perhaps you too, or at least enough Westerners may think, there's nothing we can learn from you, the Orientals? If so, then I will only point you to the fact that China fell 200 years ago, and the beginning point of it was when China thought that it can no longer learn anything from the West. So let us begin by accepting some humility. All of us, whether you're from the East, from the West, I think we all need to learn. And so oftentimes, the way you learn is to begin to realize your own shortcomings. If you don't see your own shortcomings, there's no need to learn. But obviously, the world tells us, history tells us, that Asia has much to learn. And surely, if I may be allowed to say, the West, too, has a lot to learn. And the place to begin is to ask the question, what's wrong with me? It is best that we ask that question, what's wrong with me, rather than what's wrong with you. And however, for somebody who is like myself, like Angelina, we went to the same high school, although I was quite a few years ahead of her, I'm sure. I lived many years in this country. I speak like a Westerner. I think like a Westerner. And so I'm a little schizo, in the sense that I am both Chinese by ethnicity, and I'm very American by culture, but I never lost my cultural roots of my Chineseness either. So that makes me both Chinese and American, both East and West. So when I criticize the East, don't think that I'm saying you are wrong. I'm saying I am wrong. When I criticize the West, don't think that I'm saying that something wrong with you. No, something wrong with me, because I'm both. So let me begin by saying that, let me begin by picking on the Westerners first, since I'm standing right here in America. Well, a lot of things, in the last couple of years and decades that points to the fact that perhaps we need a new way of looking at the world. A good beginning point is that the Second World War, the end of it, was really the height of American power. And representing the West, being a leader of the West, America represented the best of really many, many things, from education to its magnanimous spirit in helping Japan and Germany and so forth. And so there is much to praise the West for. However, I often think it this way. I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1949. And I'm aging. I'm over 60. And so is the post-war world. They're older than me. They're 65, 66-year-old. And when you get to our age, Jack, you feel it. This morning, I went to Stanford to do my annual medical checkup. Man, I have a long list I want to talk to my doctor about. Just all from the last 1 year, and it's called aging. And when you age, a lot of things happen that you prefer not to happen. So what are some of the things? Well, first of all, population is aging in the West. It's just an objective fact. It's not a moral judgment. It is just a numerical fact. And when the population ages, something happens to society. You cannot grow as much as when you are all young, when we were all young. In one of my articles that somebody reminded me just now at the reception, I said, why should the world, at least the developed world, grow? Take Japan, for example, very wealthy country. They have 127 million people. But by 2025, that's only, 14 years from now, it's projected to have 120 million people only. 7 million people less than what it is today. So roughly, 5% less people? So why should Japan grow? If it treads water, plus or minus 1% GDP growth or negative growth a year, that's darn good. Because on a per capita basis, you're okay. And so why should you and I stick to the post-World War II paradigm that we have to grow, economically speaking? Can we grow when your population is aging and indeed diminishing, such as in Italy, such as in many of the Western European countries? The United States is probably one of the few exceptions. So population-wise, it tells us that, relatively speaking, the West got to be in decline in some way. Another one is the aging economy. I think we have long passed the height of the post-World War II supercycle. Consider again my Japanese friends, or for that matter, American, German. They have everything. What else do they need? Okay, you got an iPad, you got an iPod. Every so often, you get something new as a toy. But overall, is that enough to sustain an economy to continue growing? Or is the economic life cycle such that we are on a downdraft? Consider the aging institutions, both domestically and internationally. You know, I was giving a talk at the University of Pennsylvania a few months ago. And I told everybody, I said, when I get finished with this talk, I'm going to get on a train to go to Washington, D.C. And when I get on that train, I will realize I would be very cognizant of the fact that I've just stepped into a third world country. The train is slow, the train is bad, the phone doesn't work. You know, I've been in China a lot, right? There's only one spot. Jack, were you with us that time when we went to Tibet? We were together, right? We were in Tibet, and we're at the depth of a gorge, and when they turned a corner, that was the only time I had a drop call. That's China. But you drive from JFK to Manhattan, your phone, I guarantee you, get dropped at least 2 or 3 times, right? Now, why is that the infrastructure aging? America has all the technology to do a better job. It has all the money. At least you can print the money. There are many ways. I'm sure investment bankers will figure out a way. What's wrong? What's wrong is the domestic political system that is aging. Look at the international arena. United Nations, 60 years ago, that was at the height, you know, after post-World War, and there's a lot of hope in front of mankind. So United Nations worked relatively okay. But then 56 years later, it's aging. IMF, WTO, WTO, and so forth. So let me first say this, that when I say that the West is a problem, a lot of those problems are just due to time. just like when I went to see my doctor this morning. There are ways in social structures and social systems that you can regenerate. Technology is one possibility, but will it be sufficient to change in an important way? I am not sure. The other reason why I believe in the relative decline of the West, and I emphasize the word relative, is not that I believe America, say for example, is going to be defeated or economically or otherwise anytime soon. It's still the strongest, biggest economy in the world in many, many ways, partly due to all the universities that we have just mentioned. But having said that, the relative growth rate of the United States and in much of Western Europe will lag behind. And that is a good thing. That means you start at a higher base. That means that you advance, you progress earlier. And it's just now, the time has come that many other developing economies are finally beginning to catch up. I don't even use the word catch up. They're just beginning to catch up. They have a long way to go. So in relative terms, yes, the West is waning, and one reason is because of the aging problem. The other one, and I only have two, the other one is that what I call the Great Deception. And that is the title of, what the working title of an article that I've been working on. And that is the economic growth that you and I have enjoyed. Most of us were born after, in this room, are born around or after the end of the Second World War. Well, how did we grow in the last 40, 50 years? I think hindsight tells us that much of the growth was to borrow from our next generation. We're borrowing from the next generation in many ways. For example, we have a debt that is so big, there's just no way, Jack, in your lifetime and mine, we'll be able to pay them. So what happened? Your son and mine, too bad, son, pay for it. We built our growth very much by borrowing money, just not unlike individually in the last 15 years, 20 years, or 15 years. This country, with all the real estate boom and so forth, you borrow from the future and now pay back time. Our social securities, a lot of unfunded liabilities. And in this respect, by the way, China is no better than the United States. I think China is in equally deep water. And again, it's just people my age, we don't have a good future unless you are independently sufficient financially. Otherwise, your future may not be that bright because your social security may not be funded. Natural resources. We have exhausted more natural resources than any other generation, probably from the time of Adam. You put them all together. I think in our lifetime, Jack, we probably exhausted more natural resource than any other generation put together.